1. About 5 years ago, I went to a house party for a friend of a friend who had just purchased a new home. I was freshly 20 and ready to get my drink on. My friend Sam and I had pre-drinks at my apartment and walked over to the party. The party raging when we got there. Luckily, we arrived just in time to watch some drunk ass fall into the fire. He was okay. This drunk ass's friend walks over to Sam and I and starts to chat us up. Sam knows this guy, Kyle, from the couple who just bought the house. Kyle gave off kind of a creepy, clingy vibe. He kept touching my arm while talking to me and said my name every sentence. "What's your favorite drink, Anacantha? So, Anacantha, you live around here?" Eventually, we managed to carefully disentangle ourselves from Kyle and went inside to chat with the rest of the girls at the party. We were inside at the table joking around when the guys came in from outside to complain that we weren't outside with them. "Every party needs beautiful girls," shouts Kyle as he stared directly into my eyes. The girls as a whole complained that it was too chilly out, and the fire wasn't big enough to throw much heat into the yard. I was sitting at the table, think high bar table with tall chairs, when Kyle came over and planted himself directly between my legs. He then started talking right against my face. I was super uncomfortable, so I backed up and told him he was too close. Kyle didn't move, but he noticed that I was without a drink. He offered to get me a beer and I said sure, thinking that he was going to bring me a closed can or bottle. Nope. Kyle went into the back room of the kitchen, fumbled in his beer box, opens the beer and brought it to me. I said thanks, accepted the already opened beer and placed it on the table. I had no intentions of drinking an already opened beer from this creepy dude. I managed to sneak away with a handful of girls for a house tour and left Kyle upstairs with the rest of the party. The girls told me they noticed that Kyle, whom they called Turtle due to appearance, is really focusing on me and that I shouldn't do anything to lead him on. I assured them that I was not trying to lead Kyle on, and I was doing my best to graciously fend off his advances. We finished the tour and headed back to the kitchen for more drinks. Kyle noticed that I was beerless. He pressed another already opened beer into my hand. "Drink up, beautiful," he said, staring dead into my eyes. I pressed the beer to my lips and pretended to swallow. I got up with beer and walked to a couch and discreetly hid my beer on the floor between the coffee table. This went on for an hour. Kyle continues to notice I'm without a drink and keeps pressing opened beers into my hand. I kept walking around, leaving opened beers in various places in the house and not drinking them. Finally, Sam came to me and said she wanted to go home. Thank God. We were in the back room of the kitchen, getting our shoes on, and Kyle came over. He took my hand and said, "Give me your number, Anacantha. I can't believe I got to spend so much time with such a babe tonight. I'd love to get to know you more." Kyle says this in a cold, monotone voice while staring into my eyes. I had chills. I pulled my hand out of his and said, "Give me your number, I'll text you sometime," with zero intention of ever putting the number into my phone or texting this psychopath. I was honestly afraid of what might happen to me if I outright said no to him. There was something empty and cold about his eyes. Kyle took my phone and put himself in my contacts. He looked at Sam and said, "Any chance you can give us a minute? I'd like to say goodnight properly." Kyle grabbed my waist hard and pulled me towards him. Sam, God bless her, took the other side of my waist, spun me around and said, "No can do. This is my girl right here and she's got to take my drunk ass home." Kyle glared at her with cold fury. The phrase, "if looks could kill," comes to mind. Kyle is still holding my phone and texts himself from it, so he has my number. He hands my phone back without a word, spins on his heel and leaves Sam and I alone in this dark room. We leave, thankfully without incident. Kyle texted me steadily throughout that night. He started 15 minutes after I left the party, until I blocked his number the next day. They started off innocently enough. "Hey, how are you? Did you get home? I miss your beautiful face," etc. He started to get aggressive when I didn't reply, texting me things to the tune of "fuck you, fucking stupid cunt, answer me." I blocked him and thought nothing of it for about 2 years. My group of friends had distanced themselves from Kyle, and we didn't cross paths again. 2 years later, almost to the day, Kyle was arrested for stabbing his then girlfriend to death. He stabbed her over 100 times. I'm so glad I got away so easy. Kyle, let's never, ever, ever meet again. 2. This happened about 10 months back in February. I lived in a student house during my final year of university with 3 other girls who I had been living with since my first year. We lived in a tall but thin house in the suburbs of a moderate-sized UK city, in what I would call a fairly safe area. There was actually a police station less than a 5-minute walk from my house. The other 3 girls were on the same course, and due to an inability to attend anything in second year, whilst one had been on a term abroad, had all signed up for the same modules. This meant that a lot of the time they were on campus together, as they had the same lectures but on different seminars. And it wasn't unusual at all for me to come back to the house and be the only one there. As further context, otherwise I sound like a complete idiot, we also had a slightly strange landlady. On the first day I moved in, she met me at the door with my mum, and then proceeded to introduce us to basically her entire family, including her dog. Whilst it's a legal requirement in the UK, and I imagine many other countries too, to give 24 hours notice if they are calling round to arrange a mutually convenient time, our landlady seemed to have not picked up on this, even after one of my more assertive housemates told her loads of times we didn't like her coming round uninvited, or the numerous members of her family. Her daughter-in-law cleaned our house, her husband was a plumber, her son did handiwork, etc. She didn't get it. We resigned ourselves to random drop-ins. So, sorry for the long intro, but I feel it sets the scene for how this came about and my weird reaction. I walked home from campus one day and, as usual, found no one home when I got there. To this day, I can't quite decide whether the door was locked when I got home or not, but I always locked it behind me when I got inside. I lived on the top floor of the house, and never heard anything on the bottom floor, so it was always safer just keeping the door locked. I went straight up to my room and got into bed and spent probably 20 minutes on my laptop. 20 minutes later, I heard a sound from the floor below me and, thinking either someone had come home or one of my friends had bailed on the lecture and had been home the whole time, went down to see who it was. The middle floor had 2 bedrooms and a bathroom on it, and I checked the first bathroom to find it empty. I therefore went straight into the second bedroom, assuming my best friend was at home, and ready to have a moan about my day. Inside, however, was not my friend, but a man who seemed to be trying to move the bookshelf. Now, this is when you have to understand that, honestly, finding strange men in the house was not unusual, if annoying, and we had mentioned to the landlady about Izzy's blind a few weeks back. I think my mind probably just tried to put 2 and 2 together, and came up with that this was what he was here to do. He turned to face me and, to be honest, didn't look particularly shocked to see me there, adding to me thinking he was supposed to be. "Thanks for coming round to sort this. Do you want a cup of tea?" He didn't actually reply properly except some weird grunting noise, which is not that unusual with some heavily accented northerners, which I took to mean yes, and went downstairs to make it. I texted Iz while I was downstairs. Landlady has finally sent someone to fix the blind, no warning as per. Iz is quite an easily irritated soul, and she hates people going in her room, even people she knows. Minutes later, before she even replied to me, she sent a text in our group message with the landlady. "We've asked you multiple times to tell us when you're sending someone round to our house. It's not really acceptable. I appreciate that we did ask for the blinds to be fixed, but we should still be given notice." I had made the cup of tea by this point and was taking it upstairs to the man. He was still in her room, not by the window now, but near her desk. But honestly, I must be stupid because I still didn't think anything of it. I set the cup down and said, "Let me know when you're finished." He nodded once at me. I went back upstairs and I was in my room for another 5 minutes when my laptop came through with a message. I thought we discussed this the last time someone came round. We will give you proper notice when there is a further issue requiring action being dealt with. Landlady. Kiss kiss. Iz doesn't hang around. Clearly the lecture was dull. There's someone over right now in my room, and you're always saying that next time you'll let us know and then don't. She then sent something about her dad being unimpressed, which was a load of rubbish. We haven't sent someone round. Who is there? I must admit, that text made me feel suddenly very sick. My room was directly above Izzy's, and I could still hear him moving around below. Iz replied before I could. The man to do the blinds, I don't know exactly who he is. We haven't sent anyone. Who let him in? Who did he say he was? Iz called me. She asked me if I had let him in, to which I replied I hadn't. And then it dawned on me that he had probably been there before I even arrived. Iz immediately told me to go down and ask him what the hell he was doing here, and who the hell was he. I don't know if she would have actually had the courage to do so if she had been the one at home, but I sure as hell didn't. As quickly and quietly as I could, I pocketed my phone and hurried down the stairs to go to the front door and maybe find help or call the police. But he was downstairs now. Our bottom floor has stairs from the sitting room going up to the upper floors, and then one side is the kitchen, and the other side is the hallway with a door to someone's bedroom off of that. He was stood right by the entrance to the kitchen as I came down the stairs, and I jumped out of my skin when I saw him there. I was bringing the mug down. I couldn't exactly see the mug, but I literally didn't care in the slightest. It will sound quite stupid, and trust me, I feel fairly stupid about basically this entire event, but I was worried if I just ran to the door, which was locked, that he would get me before I managed to unlock it and get out. So instead I said, "You all finished then?" "I am." I silently moved to unlock the front door and he walked out into the street, heading down towards the river which was at the end of our road. I'm talking a big river that runs through the whole city. I locked the door again and checked the back door was locked before calling back Iz, who had called me 3 times since. I couldn't help crying over the phone, and the girls skipped the second lecture to come home. Iz looked through her room while loads of stuff had been rummaged through, and some of the furniture moved about. Nothing seemingly was taken. Despite her having a laptop and jewellery in the room, even a big obvious jar of her tip money on the shelf was untouched. We, perhaps stupidly, didn't call the police as nothing was taken, and we thought as we potentially had left the door unlocked, they might not consider it intrusion or whatever. I was endlessly nervous in our house after that, and spent a lot more time on campus, though partially as my dissertation was due a couple of months later, but we never saw anything more about it again. So as stupid as I may sound throughout this story, it was actually fairly terrifying for me, and I 100% don't want to relive the occasion. My friend brought it up a few months later at a party, and I introduced it as the time I offered an intruder a cup of tea, which is why I have titled it as such. 3. During my first and only semester of college, my very good friend Jake was dating this girl, Stacy, that we knew in high school. For reference, I'm female and I was 18 at the time, now 26. Now many people back in high school did not like Stacy, and I was one of them. To me, she was the definition of a sketchy person. She was a pathological liar, and not even a good one, as her stories rarely added up, and she would constantly contradict herself, sometimes within minutes after she spouted her lie. She was one of those girls that hated drama, yet it always magically seemed to follow her around anywhere she went. She was constantly in and out of relationships throughout high school, and would go out of her way to prove that they were crazy by spreading rumors about them and getting as much sympathy from everyone around her as she could. She always had to be the center of attention wherever she went. I remember during prom night, she was dancing with her then boyfriend and he accidentally stepped on her foot while dancing, and she caused a huge scene about how he was physically abusing her. It was painful to watch. There's much more I could get into about this chick, but in general she's just an extremely toxic person who nobody should be subjected to be in the presence of. It's also worth noting that she had a drug problem that she often tried to hide. This will come into play later. Anyway, back to the story. Jake and Stacy had a class together and hit it off rather quickly. Jake was skeptical at first, but when Jake brought up her reputation in high school, Stacy claimed that she was raped by an ex-boyfriend she had, and that's why she acted the way she did, and that she worked on getting better and was fine now. My friend was incredibly insecure about being single, and being way too trustworthy, believed her, and they began dating soon after. The relationship was extremely dysfunctional and was rampant with emotional abuse and manipulation on her end. But the aspect I want to focus on was her constantly trying to squeeze money out of him and her aforementioned drug problem. Stacy would constantly ask Jake for small amounts of money here and there, usually ranging between $10 to $20. Jake didn't mind all that much and bought into her story of her struggling financially, so he felt bad. But one day she asked for $500 to cover her rent, which he refused. She flipped out on him and didn't talk to him until she drunk-dialed him late at night, and began revealing that she was doing drugs and it was all because of how terrible her life was, and that he wasn't helping. I don't know why he didn't break up with her then and there, but the next day they talked it out and made up and the issue was dropped. Here's where everything finally comes to a head. It was around 10:30ish on a Friday night, and keep in mind they've been dating for nearly 2 months at this point. I'm chilling in my living room with another friend of mine. We're sitting on the couch bullshitting about stuff going on in our lives, and I get a call from Jake. Jake explained to me that Stacy was hanging out at a friend's house for the day, and asked him if he could pick her up at around midnight, as buses in that area stopped running after 8, and she needed to be in work at 9 the next morning. He said sure, and as the time he needed to leave to pick her up drew closer, his mother called him saying she was working overtime and wouldn't be out until midnight, and she had the car. He asked if I could drive with him to go pick Stacy up. I'll admit I would rather have left her to her own devices, but he sounded desperate and he is an amazing friend who would do anything for me, so I did him a solid and told him to start walking over to my house. He gets to my house about 45 minutes later. My friend went back to her house, she lived across the street from me, and Jake and I get in my car. He texts her that he's leaving now and that I was driving him, to which she said the dreaded K. I drove an 04 Subaru Impreza WRX-STI at the time, for reference. We reached Stacy's friend's house, which was located on the outskirts of town, in a pretty sketchy neighborhood. The road was very poorly lit, and to my luck, the streetlight in front of Stacy's friend's house was off. I refused to park in front of there as I didn't feel comfortable sitting in the dark, so I parked 3 houses down between 2 cars under a functional streetlight. Jake texts Stacy, "We're here." She doesn't respond. As we were waiting there, a truck drives by, and I notice about 4 men in the truck, I think it was an Oldsmobile, looking around for something. At first I figured maybe they were lost and looking for an address. But this thought was thrown out the window, when not even 2 minutes later the truck drives by again, this time slower. The guy in the front passenger seat makes direct eye contact with me, as the truck passes my car by. I tell Jake something is definitely wrong and to call Stacy so we can leave. He agrees and calls her, and is dead quiet so I can hear the conversation. She answers and says,
"Hey, where are you?"
"We're down the block, come outside," Jake said.
"I'm looking outside and I don't see your car."
She answered back, "We're in running circles 234's car, it's a grey Subaru." Jake said back, and almost immediately after he says that, the phone call drops. Jake just looks at his phone in complete confusion, wondering what the hell is going on. I'm starting to get extremely nervous now between both the truck that was circling around before and Stacy's sketchy behavior. I decide that if something is up, I'm not just gonna be a sitting duck and stay parked on the road if shit goes south. I pull out of the spot and drive up in front of the house, and as I'm pulling out, I hear a vehicle loudly in the distance behind us, and I look in my rear view mirror to see the truck from before, now turning quickly, driving up the block. I freak out and floor it out of the spot and begin speeding up the block. The truck catches up with me and Jake, yells at me to turn, and that they're going to shoot the car. To my horror, I look behind me, and the guy in the back seat is leaning out the window with a gun in his hand, aiming at the car. I quickly turn and floor it down the road as they struggled to mirror what I did. I made another left turn, narrowly missing an oncoming car, and slammed on the gas. Luckily, I'm halfway down the block by the time they turn onto it. I'm surprised I was driving as well as I was at the time. Jake said I looked extremely calm and determined during all of this. But internally, I was freaking out. I was worried they were going to run me off the road, or we were going to get a bullet shot through the back of our skulls. I made another left turn and drove like a bat out of hell towards the highway. The truck turned onto the block when I was about a block down, but stopped and turned down another block when I got close to the highway. I turn onto the highway and merge into the next lane. A few minutes pass by with us going back and forth, questioning who those guys were and what they wanted, until Jake gets a call on his phone from Stacy. He picks it up, puts it on speaker, and shakily says hello.
Where are you? I'm fucking waiting for you,
she screams. He explains the situation, to which she proceeds to call him a liar and says he's not actually here and was standing her up. Jake loses his shit and screams at her that we almost got killed, and calls her out on her bizarre behavior throughout all of this. She starts yelling again, but she goes silent, and we hear a door quickly open and someone loudly yells in the background on the phone, "They got away! Stacy, where the fuck are you?" Silence follows this for a few seconds before she hangs up the phone. Jake and I look at each other, and Jake said, "She had something to do with this." Long story short, we spent the entire drive theorizing why this happened, and we think we may have hit what happened. Jake brought up her asking for money before, and when she asked for $500, she probably needed the money to pay off a dealer, and when she didn't get it, she had to find another way. We think she set us up to head to that house to pick her up, and those guys were probably the dealer and his buddies, who conveniently show up looking to rob us of everything we had on us, and possibly jack the car, hoping it would cover her debt. She probably thought Jake was using his car, and gave them the description of his car, not realizing we were using my car, which might explain why they circled the block in confusion, and why she hung up the phone immediately after Jake gave her a description of my vehicle, as she probably called them to update them. I dropped Jake off at his house and I went home. I know people say after scary encounters that they're always shaken up and their emotions are running in a million directions, but I was just emotionally drained. I felt like I just couldn't feel anything, and just wanted to go home and go to bed, which was what I immediately did when I got home. I filed a police report the next morning on those guys, and they said they'd look into, but I never heard anything after I filed the report, so who knows what they've been up to ever since. As far as Stacy goes, our theory was further solidified when Jake saw her in class on Monday, where she approached him and berated him for Friday night, claiming she walked all the way home and had her phone and wallet stolen by some druggies. Jake basically called her out on that whole night, claiming she set us up to get robbed, to which she denied it and called him crazy. He told her that they were done, and she just yelled, "Fine!" and walked to the back of the classroom. The druggies were probably the dealer and his friends, who robbed her to cover the debt. To our surprise, she never attempted to contact us again and kept her distance, probably because she knew we were onto her and wanted to keep the heat off her. After I dropped out, I never saw her again, and the last I heard anything about her was from Jake, where he told me she developed a long-distance relationship with some guy online and dropped out halfway through the semester to move to Massachusetts to live with him. As far as I know, that was the last anyone I know of ever saw or heard from her. Overall, I'm happy. I trusted my instincts and picked up on the fact that something was wrong, as this encounter may have had a different outcome. In hindsight, they most likely weren't going to kill us. But that's easier to say after the fact because, at the time, we didn't know what their intentions were, and for all we knew, they may have had even more planned than just to rob us. This was the first of quite a few scary and creepy experiences I've had in my life. And this actually wasn't the scariest one for me. But that's another story for another time. So Stacy and the 4 men in the truck, my life has been going perfectly fine since we met. Please do me a favor and don't ruin it by crossing paths with me again. Thank you. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 261. Thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Still silent? Okay, good. Usually at this time you get dogs, and lately, the latest addition has been ice cream vans going ding-dilly ding-dilly ding with their sirens right up until about 9 o'clock, I think. I think that's when they've got to shut the siren off. So what they do around here, I don't know what it's like in other countries, but so when they have to turn the, not a siren, what would you call it? The little music box, when they play their tune, when they legally have to turn that off, they've taken to blowing a whistle as they go through the streets, because that's far less annoying. So yeah, just listening patiently, trying to get the outro done before they start making noise. Although it's an outro, so I suppose it doesn't really matter if there's noise in the background. Okay, I'm going to stop yammering on and shut up and go. So, until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.